The Deep Space Monitoring Station detected the distress call at 3:42 hours. The signal came from 442B, a small agricultural colony 3 light-years from the nearest coalition military base. The message was simple but terrifying. The colony was under attack. An unknown fleet had arrived without warning and began destroying everything. Commander Gray sat in the command center of the space station, listening to the transmission repeat over and over. The voice of Governor Elizabeth Drake was calm but urgent. She reported that the Void Swarm had arrived with over 200 attack ships. The colony's defense grid was failing. They had maybe 6 hours before total collapse. Looked at the tactical display. 3 major coalition fleets were moving toward the system, but they were all too far away. The nearest fleet would arrive in 8 days. 8 days was too long. The colony would be gone by then. The Coalition Council was already arguing. Some commanders said the colony was lost, and there was no point in sending help. They wanted to preserve military strength for a larger war that might come later. Other commanders wanted to send everything, but that would take too much time. Turned away from the display, he had seen war before. He had lost friends to the Void Swarm in other battles. The Swarm was brutal and efficient. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. When they attacked a colony, nothing was left behind but dust and memories. His communications officer looked at him with sad eyes. The young man was barely 23 years old. He had never seen combat before. "Sir, should we send a response?" the officer asked quietly. Before could answer, another signal came through the system. This one was different. It came from a human destroyer that had been on routine patrol. The USS Valiant. Captain Hayes was the commanding officer, a man had worked with before. They had fought together during the campaign at Sirius 7. New was brave, but sometimes reckless. His message was clear and direct. He was changing course immediately toward 442B. He did not ask for permission. He did not wait for orders from the council. He was going to help the colony with or without support. Leaned back in his chair. It was a crazy decision. One destroyer could not fight 200 attack ships, but it was exactly what would do. The human captain believed in protecting people who could not protect themselves. Made a decision of his own. He opened a secure communication channel to the mercenary fleet. They were currently stationed 30 light hours away from 442B, performing routine patrol operations in the outer sector. The commander was from the harsh world of Prime. She was tough and practical. She did not make decisions based on emotion. But knew something else about. She respected courage and tactical thinking. And she had fought against the Void Swarm before. She understood how dangerous they were. "This is Gray," he said into the communication system. "I have a situation that needs immediate attention. The colony at 442B is under attack. Captain Hayes from the USS Valiant is moving to intercept. I think you should know about this." The response came back after a 20-second delay. His voice was rough and direct. "Why should I care about a human destroyer and a dead colony?" "Because he's going to fight anyway," said. "And because the Coalition Council is doing nothing. That means the Void Swarm will keep expanding their territory. They will attack your patrol routes next. They will attack your stations. You can stop them now while they are focused on the colony, or you can wait and fight them later when they have more ships." Another delay. 30 seconds this time. Could imagine thinking through the problem. She was no fool. She would understand the logic. "Send me coordinates," said finally. "And send me the complete tactical data on the Void Swarm fleet. If the human is stupid enough to go, I want to know exactly how stupid." Felt a small smile. That was way of saying yes. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Valiant, was reviewing the sensor data from the colony. The Void Swarm fleet was exactly where it had said it would be. 217 attack ships, arranged in combat formation around 442B. The colony's defense grid was failing faster than anyone had expected. Called his officers to the bridge. They were good people. Lieutenant Frank Cooper was his tactical officer. He was young but brilliant with weapon systems. Chief Engineer David Lee kept the ship's engines running at peak performance. Medical Officer Sarah Mitchell was ready for the casualties that would surely come. "The colony is going to die if we do nothing," said simply. "I know the odds are bad. I know this might be the last run for all of us. But I cannot sit by and watch an entire population get destroyed when I can do something about it." Frank leaned forward. "Captain, we do not have the firepower to fight that fleet. We are one destroyer. They have over 200 ships." We are not going to fight them the way they expect, said. We are going to make them confused. We are going to hit them fast and hard where they are not expecting it, and we are going to hope that the fleet shows up to help. Flagship dropped out of faster-than-light space 3 hours before the USS Valiant would arrive at 442B. Commander stood on her command bridge, studying the tactical display with cold precision. Her fleet was small compared to most military forces. Only 15 ships, but each one carried warriors who had survived the worst conditions in the galaxy. Her people came from Prime, a world where gravity was crushing, atmosphere was toxic, and predators could kill you in 1,000 different ways. Did not believe in luck. They believed in preparation, strength, and the willingness to do what was necessary to survive. She did not care about the colony. They were soft. They grew food. They made art. They talked about peace and cooperation. In view, they were everything that was weak about the coalition. But she understood something that many did not. If the Void Swarm was not stopped now, they would keep expanding. And that expansion would eventually threaten interests. It was simple mathematics. Act now or pay a much larger price later. Opened a communication channel to the USS Valiant. This is Commander of the Fleet. I have received your coordinates. My fleet is moving to intercept position. What is your tactical situation? Response came quickly. Captain Hayes, USS Valiant. The colony has approximately 4 hours before total collapse. I'm moving to engage the Void Swarm fleet at high speed. My plan is to hit them hard at the outer perimeter, disrupt their formation, and create chaos. If I can do that, maybe we can buy time for evacuation. That is a poor plan, said bluntly. It will get your ship destroyed and accomplish nothing. A lone destroyer cannot create enough chaos to matter. There was a pause, then said, Then I guess we need a better plan. Can we conference? I am transmitting my tactical data now. Studied the information as it came through, had gathered detailed sensor readings on the Void Swarm formation. He had studied their previous battles. He understood their patterns. It was good work. Not the planning of a warrior who only knew direct combat, but the thinking of someone who understood strategy. She made a decision. I will meet you at the rendezvous point. My fleet will be there in 90 minutes. The meeting happened on neutral space between the two fleets, board its flagship with his tactical officer, Frank Cooper. They were led to a conference room where waited with her senior commanders. They were intimidating. They were all larger than humans, with harder skin and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. Did not waste time with greetings. Explain your thinking, human. Why should my warriors risk their lives for a colony of soft people who cannot defend themselves? Met her eyes directly. He did not show fear, even though any of these could tear him apart with their bare hands. Because if the Void Swarm takes 442B unopposed, they will become bolder. They will attack other colonies. They will expand their territory. And eventually they will come to space. That is when they will become your problem. They are not warriors, but they are coalition members. They have resources. They have value. Losing them weakens all of us. Words, said one of his officers, a commander named. The human says nice things, but humans are not warriors. You are soft. You break easily under pressure. Frank Cooper stepped forward. We broke your outer perimeter defenses at the Outer Rim Station, Commander. We destroyed your supply line at Tau. We held the line at Sirius 7 for 3 days while you evacuated wounded from your position. His expression darkened, but he did not argue. Raised a hand. Enough, we are not here to argue about past battles. She looked at. Show me your plan. Show me why this is not suicide. Activated the tactical display. A holographic model of the Void Swarm formation appeared. He pointed to the outer rings. The Void Swarm maintains a standard formation. Heavy ships in the middle, lighter attack craft on the perimeter. They rely on overwhelming numbers and coordinated fire. But their communication network has a weakness. If we can jam or disrupt their outer communication relay stations, the outer formations lose contact with command. He moved the display. The USS Valiant will strike here at the first relay station. Fast, hard, quick withdrawal. We damage or destroy the relay, then we jump to the next one. Meanwhile, your fleet hits the opposite side of their formation. You target their defensive grid. You hit them where it hurts. The swarm becomes confused. Their formations break apart. When formations break apart, individual ships become vulnerable. Frank pointed out the details. The human ships have advanced targeting systems. The ships have superior combat power. Together, we can isolate and destroy groups of their ships before they can regroup. Studied the display for a long time. It was not a bad plan. It was not a perfect plan. But it was clever. It did not rely on the humans matching the swarm's firepower. It relied on understanding the swarm's weakness and exploiting it. "The human ships are fast," said finally. "The ships are strong, together this could work, but there is risk. My warriors will die, your crew will die." "Yes," agreed, "but the colony will not die if we succeed, and we will all die eventually anyway. The question is whether we die for something that matters." His expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. She turned to her officers. "We move to intercept. We follow the human captain's plan. All ships move to attack formation, shields up, weapons armed, and someone find out the name of every Void Swarm commander in that fleet. When we find them, we will take their heads as payment for this day." Smiled, a terrible expression on his face. "The fly with you, human. Let us see if your plan is as good as your words." And Frank returned to the USS Valiant. The crew was ready. Every person aboard understood what they were about to do. They were outnumbered more than 50 to 1, but they had a plan and they had allies. Stood on the bridge and looked at his crew. "In the next few hours, we are going to do something that everyone will say is impossible. We are going to protect people we have never met against an enemy we cannot hope to defeat alone. But we are not alone, and impossible is just another word for a problem that requires a creative solution." He paused, then added, "For the colony, for everyone down there who is counting on us. Let us show the Void Swarm what humans can do when we fight for something that matters." The crew cheered. David Lee pushed the engines to maximum. The USS Valiant accelerated toward 442B with the fleet flying in perfect formation beside them. An unlikely alliance was born. A human destroyer and a fleet, united against overwhelming odds, knew the chances of survival were almost zero. But he also knew that sometimes the most important victories come at the highest cost. The Void Swarm detected the incoming fleet 14 minutes before the USS Valiant, and the ships were in weapons range. The enemy commander, a creature called Nine, studied the sensor data with something like amusement. Two forces coming to die. How boring. He had conquered 1,000 colonies. He would conquer 1,000 more. One human destroyer and 15 ships would provide a moment of entertainment before returning to the work of destruction. On the surface of 442B, Governor Elizabeth Drake watched the orbital sensors from the colony's main administrative building. The structure shook as another Void Swarm strike destroyed a nearby industrial complex. People screamed. Alarms wailed constantly. The air tasted like ash and burning metal. Drake had been the governor for 3 years. She had led the colony's expansion into new territory. She had organized the agricultural development that made 442 be a valuable part of the coalition. And now she watched helplessly as everything burned. Her communications officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, looked up from her console. "Governor, we have contact from the coalition forces. Human destroyer USS Valiant and a mercenary fleet are moving to intercept." Drake felt a spark of hope. It was small and fragile, but it was real. "How long until they reach effective weapons range?" 12 minutes, Lisa said. "Governor, we need to prepare the evacuation ships. We cannot wait for the battle to end. We need to start moving people now." Drake nodded. She activated the colony-wide broadcast system. "All personnel proceed to designated evacuation shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Move quickly and calmly. Bring your families. Leave nothing behind except your lives." The people were peaceful, but they were not helpless. They had prepared for evacuation for weeks, ever since reports first came that the Void Swarm was moving through their region of space. The evacuation shelters could hold maybe 70% of the colony's population. That meant 30% would have to wait for a second wave. It meant some people would not make it off the planet at all if the battle lasted too long. Drake moved to the window and looked up at the sky. The Void Swarm ships were visible now, dark shapes against the blue atmosphere. And then, suddenly, 2 bright streaks of light cut across the sky. The human destroyer and the ships had entered the system. In space, the battle began with terrible violence. The USS Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light speed and opened fire immediately. Frank Cooper's targeting systems locked on to the first communication relay station. The human destroyer's main guns roared. 3 nuclear-tipped missiles streaked toward the target, moving at 15 kilometers per second. The relay station was destroyed in a cascade of explosions. Its antimatter reactors failed and sent a wash of radiation spreading outward. 2 nearby Void Swarm attack ships were caught in the blast. They spun out of control, their shields failing. At the same instant, the fleet attacked from the opposite side. Their weapons were different from the human guns. Military technology was based on kinetic projectiles and raw power rather than the sophisticated guidance systems humans preferred. But kinetic projectiles did not need to be elegant. They only needed to hit. Commander's flagship, the Pride, opened fire on the Void Swarm's defensive grid. Massive plasma projectiles crossed the space between the fleets. When they hit, armor exploded. Ships bucked sideways from the impact. Shields collapsed under the sustained assault. The Void Swarm Commander 9 felt something shift in his calculations. The attack was more coordinated than he had expected. The humans were moving with precision and purpose. They were hitting hard and fast, but they were still outnumbered, still impossible to defeat. Then something unexpected happened. The USS Valiant jumped to a new position and attacked the second communication relay station. Missiles and laser fire bracketed the target. The relay exploded. Suddenly, 12 Void Swarm ships in that section of the fleet lost contact with the main command network. Without coordination, without receiving orders, they began to act independently. Some held formation. Some accelerated toward the attacking forces. Some moved to defend themselves. The unified fleet became fragmented. Individual ships became targets. Frank Cooper worked his targeting systems with brilliant precision. He identified the isolated groups and fed targeting data to the fleet. Commanders received the information and adjusted their attack patterns. A cruiser named the Fang of Death moved to intercept a group of 6 Void Swarm fighters. The encounter was brief and brutal. 3 of the Void Swarm fighters were destroyed. The others scattered. On the colony surface, Governor Drake felt the building shake again. But this time it was from orbital weapons fire, not from Void Swarm attacks on the ground. She checked her sensors. The Void Swarm ground strike was pausing. The enemy ships in low orbit were disengaging from their bombing runs. They were moving to deal with the new threat. "How many evacuation ships are ready?" Drake asked Lisa. "First wave is ready," Lisa replied. "We can get maybe 5,000 people off the surface in the next hour." "Do it," Drake ordered. "Start loading people immediately, and Lisa, keep me informed about the battle. Every minute we buy is another 200 people we can save." In orbit, the USS Valiant executed a series of maneuvers that seemed almost impossible. The destroyer twisted and turned through a minefield of Void Swarm attack craft, its shields flaring as weapons fire hit. But the human ship kept flying. It kept fighting. The fleet moved with brutal efficiency. They did not retreat when overwhelmed. They did not maneuver to avoid damage. They pressed forward and hit harder. 3 ships took serious damage. One of them, a transport-class vessel named the Survivors, had to break formation and limp toward the outer system. But they kept advancing. 9 made a critical error in response. He committed more of his forces to dealing with the human and attack. This meant fewer ships available for the bombardment of the colony. The assault on the ground slowed. Then it stopped. Drake watched the numbers change in her data systems. The Void Swarm was no longer dropping kinetic strikes on the population centers. The enemy ships in low orbit were moving upward, disengaging from the ground assault entirely. "We are getting away," Lisa whispered. "We are actually going to get away." But the battle in space was far from over. The USS Valiant had destroyed 2 relay stations. The fleet had damaged the Void Swarm's primary defensive grid, but the Void Swarm still had over 200 ships. The human destroyer and fleet still numbered only 16 total. The odds had improved, but they were still bad. Understood that his next move would decide everything. He studied that the USS Valiant pushed its engines to absolute maximum. David Lee had exceeded every safety specification. The ship's frame groaned under the acceleration. The reactor was pushing out power that the designers had only intended as theoretical maximum. But the destroyer responded. It moved faster than it was supposed to move. It achieved velocity that should have been impossible. Frank Cooper locked his weapons systems on the Void Swarm command ship. The target was massive, a vessel that carried the commander and his staff, protected by multiple shield generators and defensive arrays. It was the heart of the Void Swarm fleet. "Distance decreasing," Frank reported. 50,000 kilometers, 45,000, all weapons are locked and ready. The Void Swarm command ship opened fire. Hundreds of energy weapons blazed toward the human destroyer. The USS Valiant's shields flared bright white. The ship bucked and twisted as hits impacted. The bridge crew was thrown against restraints. Alarms screamed. Sarah Mitchell, the medical officer, was in the main medical bay. She had been preparing for casualties since the moment they left the fleet. Now the ship was shaking violently. Medical supplies fell from shelves. Several crew members were injured in the turbulence. But Sarah focused. She started treating the wounds as they came in. A burned hand, a fractured arm, a head laceration. The casualties would get much worse before the battle ended, if they survived the battle at all. Stood firm on the bridge. Blood ran down his face from a wound on his forehead, but he ignored it. His eyes never left the tactical display. The USS Valiant was taking damage, heavy damage, the kind of damage that would eventually break the ship apart. But they were getting closer. 30,000 kilometers, 25,000. Full barrage, commanded. Everything we have. The USS Valiant's main battery opened fire. Missiles streaked from every launch tube. Laser cannons carved beams of coherent light toward the command ship. The smaller destroyer could not match the enemy's firepower, but it could concentrate fire at point-blank range. The first missile hit. The command ship's shields flashed and buckled. The second volley came right behind it. Another shield generator failed. The third barrage hit the hull directly. Armor plating vaporized. Internal explosions rippled through the enemy vessel. The command ship's return fire became erratic, less coordinated. Its shields were failing faster than it could regenerate them. The human destroyer was suffering terrible damage, but so was its target. At the same moment, the fleet executed its tactical plan. They had split into 3 attack groups. Each group targeted a different section of the Void Swarm formation. They hit hard, moved fast, and hit again before the enemy could respond in coordinated fashion. Commander led one attack group. His cruiser, the Crimson Fang, tore into a group of 6 Void Swarm destroyers. A frigate moved to support him. They opened fire with everything they had. One Void Swarm destroyer was vaporized in the first barrage. 2 others took critical damage. Herself led the second group. She targeted the enemy's secondary defensive grid. Her ships hit the target in waves, each ship following exactly 5 seconds behind the previous one. The pattern was relentless. Every 5 seconds, another volley of kinetic projectiles and missiles impacted the target. The defensive grid could not absorb the damage fast enough. It failed. The third group, led by a commander named Vex, moved to intercept the outer Void Swarm formations. They pushed toward the edge of the enemy fleet, cutting off retreat routes and preventing reinforcements from reaching the command ship area. The Void Swarm commander, 9, finally understood that he was losing. The realization did not come from external measurement of damage. It came from understanding the pattern of human and attacks. These enemies did not fight the way 9 expected. They did not try to match his fleet's firepower. They did not attempt to win a conventional battle of overwhelming force. Instead, they targeted his coordination. They disrupted his command structure. They isolated his ships and forced them to fight individually. And most importantly, they would not stop. Even when damaged, even when it would be logical to retreat, they kept attacking. The command ship was dying. Its shields were gone. Its armor was breached in multiple locations. Fire raged inside its hull. 9 gave the order to evacuate the ship, but even as the order was transmitted, another volley from the USS Valiant hit. The communication relay exploded. The order never reached the rest of the fleet. In that moment, the Void Swarm lost its unity. Without coordinated command, without clear direction, the fleet began to break apart. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly became isolated units. Ships that had been supporting each other suddenly were fighting alone. They did not let the opportunity pass. They pressed their attack. Every enemy ship that was separated from its group was targeted and destroyed. One by one, the Void Swarm vessels fell. The USS Valiant limped away from the wreckage of the command ship. The destroyer was barely holding together. Its shields were completely drained. Its armor was torn in a dozen places. Fires raged in 3 compartments. The bridge had been hit twice, and only emergency lighting remained. But the human crew was still alive. They were still fighting. Looked at his ship's status. 30% of the weapons systems were offline. 50% of the shields were gone. The engines were running in emergency mode. By any logical measure, the USS Valiant should have been destroyed minutes ago. But it was not destroyed. It was still flying. It was still fighting. "Target the next group of Void swarm ships," ordered. His voice was calm, even though his uniform was torn and blood dripped from his hands. "Frank, give them everything we have left." Frank Cooper worked his weapons systems with the focus of a man who had trained his entire life for this moment. The USS Valiant's remaining weapons opened fire. The barrage was smaller than before, less coordinated, but it was still effective. Another Void swarm ship was destroyed. In the main medical bay, Sarah Mitchell treated the first of the critical casualties. A crew member named Thomas had been burned badly during a reactor spike. She had used stimulant injections to keep him conscious. She was wrapping his wounds in advanced dressing material when another impact shook the ship. Sarah fell, nearly dropping her patient. She caught herself on a wall and steadied her stance. "I am still here," she said quietly to Thomas. "We are still alive. We are still fighting." Thomas smiled despite his pain. "That is what humans do," he said. "We keep fighting." In orbit, the Void swarm fleet was dissolving into chaos. The destruction of the command ship had broken the chain of command. Without central coordination, the fleet split into fragments. Some ships fought on, attacking the USS Valiant and the fleet. Others began to retreat. Still others moved aimlessly, without tactical purpose. The commanders recognized the moment of victory, transmitted orders to all her ships. "Pursue the fleeing formations, destroy them completely, let none escape. This is the moment of total victory, take it." The fleet accelerated in pursuit. The slower Void swarm ships could not escape. They were cut down one by one. The faster Void swarm vessels jumped to faster-than-light speed and retreated toward open space. Watch the sensor display. The tide had turned completely. The Void swarm was no longer attacking. The enemy was retreating. The colony was saved. He sat down in his command chair and allowed himself to breathe. The cost had been high. 2 ships had been destroyed. Another 3 vessels were so badly damaged they would require major repairs. The USS Valiant was barely functional, and his crew had taken casualties. The evacuation ships lifted off from 442B in rapid succession. Governor Elizabeth Drake watched from the main administrative building as the final transports rose into the sky. The total evacuation was complete. 90,000 colonists, all of them lifted from the surface before the Void swarm could resume their bombardment, all of them alive. The evacuation had taken 6 hours. It had been the longest 6 hours of Drake's life. She had personally guided people to the evacuation shelters. She had made sure that no one was left behind who could be saved. The people under her command had worked with calmness and efficiency. They had trusted that the battle in orbit would buy them the time they needed. And the battle in orbit had bought them that time. Drake stood with her communications officer, Lisa Park, watching the orbital display. The Void swarm fleet was still visible in the system, but the ships were moving away now. They were retreating. The pursuit by the fleet was pushing them toward the edges of the system, toward the jump points that would allow them to leave this region of space. "The coalition is transmitting," Lisa said quietly. 3 major fleet forces are converging on this location. They will arrive in approximately 20 hours. Drake nodded. That made sense. Word of the battle had spread through coalition military channels. When it became clear that a human destroyer and a mercenary fleet had repelled a Void swarm invasion, every military commander in the area had ordered their forces to converge on 442B. They wanted to be part of this. They wanted to claim credit for what had happened. But the real credit belonged to Captain Hayes and Commander. In orbit, the final battles were being fought. The USS Valiant was no longer capable of sustained combat. The destroyer was limping through space at half speed, its weapons systems mostly offline, its shields completely exhausted. But David Lee and his engineering crew had managed to restore basic power to the ship's systems. It was damaged almost beyond repair, but it was still flying. Had moved the damaged destroyer to a position where it could protect the evacuation route. If any Void swarm ships tried to go after the escape transports, the USS Valiant would intercept them. The human crew understood this. They were ready to make that sacrifice if it became necessary. But the fleet was making that sacrifice unnecessary. The Void swarm was being hunted down and destroyed. One by one, the fleeing enemy ships were being caught and obliterated. Commander's cruiser pursued a group of Void swarm destroyers. The ship was damaged, its shields failing, half its weapons offline. but it was still more than a match for the isolated Void Swarm vessels. Pushed his ship to maximum speed. The gap between pursuer and prey closed rapidly. When the distance became close enough, his weapons opened fire. The first Void Swarm destroyer exploded. The second one tried to maneuver away, but a corvette cut off its escape route. The enemy ship was surrounded. It was destroyed moments later. Its flagship led another pursuit force. The Pride was heavily damaged. One entire section of the ship was open to vacuum. The reactor had been hit multiple times and was running at minimum safe levels. But the commander was not interested in minimum. She wanted victory. "Push the reactor to maximum," she ordered her engineer. "We will catch these cowards and we will tear their ships apart." Her engineer was unnamed. He understood what was asking. He understood the risk. Running the reactor that hot in a ship that was already this damaged could cause catastrophic failure, but did not shy away from risk when victory was within reach. Made the adjustments. The reactor began to run hotter than it was designed to operate. The Pride surged forward with increased acceleration. The pursuing ships followed, and the gap between hunter and prey closed rapidly. Within minutes, the nearest Void Swarm ships were in weapons range, opened fire with everything she had. The weapons hammered at the retreating enemy vessels. 2 ships took critical hits. They began to break apart. The third ship accelerated and jumped to faster-than-light speed, escaping toward open space. Let it go, she had won enough victories today. Throughout the system, the Void Swarm was being systematically destroyed. 17 ships jumped to faster-than-light speed and escaped. 198 enemy ships were destroyed or captured. The fleet that had seemed unstoppable, the fleet that had crushed every colony it attacked, was broken and scattered. Commander Gray watched from the deep space monitoring station as the transmission reports came in. He listened to the descriptions of the battle. He heard the reports of damage, casualties, and enemy losses, and he understood that something important had happened, something that would change how the Coalition viewed human military capabilities. A lone human destroyer and a mercenary fleet had repelled a Void Swarm invasion. More than that, they had done it against impossible odds. More than that, they had done it out of choice, not out of strategic necessity. Hayes had chosen to fight, had chosen to help. Together, they had changed the outcome of a battle that everyone said was impossible to win. Stood on the bridge of the damaged USS Valiant. His uniform was torn. His face was marked with cuts and bruises. His hands were burned from the heat that had radiated from the damaged weapons systems. But his eyes were clear. His mind was focused. He looked at his crew. Frank Cooper was still sitting in the weapons station, even though there was nothing left to fire at. David Lee was in the engineering section, working to stabilize the reactor. Sarah Mitchell was treating casualties in the medical bay. They were all exhausted. They had all nearly died, and they had all succeeded. "All hands, this is the captain," said over the ship-wide communication system. "The battle is over. The Void Swarm is defeated. The colony has been evacuated successfully. You have done your duty today. You have proven that humans are capable of extraordinary things when we fight for people who need us." He paused. "Rest now. Repair the ship. Take care of your wounded. We will return home as heroes, not because of what we did, but because we chose to do it. That is what separates human courage from mere military advantage." A few hours later, met with Commander. The commander was standing on the bridge of her damaged flagship, supervising repairs. She turned when entered. "The human captain comes to congratulate himself on his victory," said, but there was no mockery in her voice. There was respect. "No," said, "I came to thank you for believing that this was possible. Without your fleet, without your willingness to take the risk, we would have failed. The colony would have been destroyed. Thousands of people would have died." Studied him for a long moment. "You are right, but I did not help because I believed in you, human. I helped because I understood that the Void Swarm represented a threat that would eventually reach my territory. I helped because it was strategically sound to help." "Yes," agreed, "but you also helped because you understand something important. When people choose to stand together, even when the odds are terrible, they can accomplish things that seem impossible. You are a warrior, Commander. You understand that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that should not be possible." His expression did not change, but she extended her massive hand, took it. The grip was strong, controlled, respectful. "The next time you fight," said, "I will stand with you again, human, but you will owe me a favor. Always collect payment for services rendered." Smiled, "I would expect nothing less, Commander." The final casualty reports came in the next day. The USS Valiant had lost 38 crew members. Another 73 were wounded. The fleet had suffered even greater losses. 2 ships destroyed completely. 74 warriors killed. Another 112 wounded. But the colony was saved. 90,000 colonists would live, they would rebuild, they would continue. Governor Elizabeth Drake sent a personal transmission to Captain Hayes. She thanked him for his courage. She thanked the fleet for their sacrifice. She promised that the colony would never forget what had been done here. When the coalition reinforcement fleets arrived, they found a very different situation than they had expected. The battle was over. The enemy was defeated. All that remained was to chase down the fleeing Void Swarm ships and ensure they did not return to this region of space. But more importantly, they found something else. They found evidence that humans could work together. They found proof that tactical brilliance and moral courage could overcome overwhelming numbers. They found the beginning of a new understanding about what humans were truly capable of. The battle at 442B became famous throughout the coalition. Military academies taught it as a perfect example of strategic thinking under pressure. Officers studied tactical decisions. Historians analyzed decisions to commit her fleet to support the human destroyer. But to the people of 442B, it was something simpler. It was the day that strangers chose to fight for them. It was the day that humans proved they would stand against impossible odds to protect people they had never met. It was the day that the tide turned against the Void Swarm. Stood in the repair bay and watched as engineers worked to patch the USS Valiant's hull. The destroyer would be repaired. The crew would recover from their wounds, and the human captain would continue to fly missions for the coalition. But something had changed. The Void Swarm had learned that humans were dangerous. The coalition had learned that humans were worth fighting with, and had learned something he had always known but never fully expressed. Humans were strongest when they fought for something larger than themselves. Humans were capable of extraordinary courage when lives depended on them. Humans could change the galaxy by simply choosing to fight, even when victory seemed impossible. That was the true meaning of what had happened at 442B. The tide had turned, and it had been turned by the simple choice to stand and fight. But the colony was saved. Thousands of lives would continue because of what had happened here. Thousands of people would go home, rebuild, continue their lives. That made everything worth it. Cal display in his mind, calculating angles and timing and the probable responses of an enemy who was now confused and reacting, rather than executing a prepared plan. "All ships, this is Valiant," he transmitted to the fleet. "Next target is the flagship. All forces converge on the command vessel. Full attack, go now." The USS Valiant jumped to a new position. The ships accelerated toward the center of the Void Swarm formation. The enemy commander watched them come and made his own calculations. He was still outnumbered. He still had the advantage. But this human captain was dangerous. This captain understood something about war that 9 had not accounted for. The human understood how to turn weakness into strength. He paused, then added, "And if they do not show up, then we buy time for the evacuation. That is all we can do." David Lee nodded slowly. "The engines can take us to maximum speed. We can be there in 4 hours. "Do it," commanded. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. We are going to war." The USS Valiant accelerated hard toward 442B. The ship's engines roared with power. Stood at the center of the bridge, watching the tactical display as the Void Swarm ships continued their assault on the helpless colony below. He thought about all the people down there. Families, children, people who had done nothing wrong except choose to build a life on a distant world. People who depended on others to protect them when danger came. Had learned a long time ago that humans were strongest when they fought for something larger than themselves. Fear was natural. Doubt was natural. But the choice to fight anyway, to stand against impossible odds for people you did not even know, that was what made humans different. The USS Valiant jumped to faster-than-light speed, streaking through the darkness of space toward a battle that everyone said was impossible to win. But it never believed in impossible, not when lives were on the line.